With the launch of the new Ryzen 7000 desktop processors, AMD also debuted a series of new motherboard chipsets. Zen 4 CPUs like the Ryzen 9 7950X, 7900X, Ryzen 7 7700X or Ryzen 5 7600X don't work on the older AM4 or AM3 platforms. They are only compatible and must be paired with one of the latest X670E, X670, B650E or B650 motherboards. The question is, which is the one to choose? What's the best AM5 motherboard for your new Ryzen 7000 processor? If you want to make an informed decision, we prepared for you a detailed video to understand better how the new chipsets compare in terms of features, options and performance, as well as what their prices are these days. Before we delve into the ins and outs of every AM5 chipset, I like to show you a quick comparison table. It's the quickest way to make sense of what these chipsets offer and how they differ. As you can see, there are 4 chipsets: X670E, X670 without an E, B650E and B650. They all support PCI Express 4.0, but only some are compatible with PCI Express 5.0. Worth noting, the 2 chipsets whose names end in E are the only ones that include PCI Express 5.0 lanes for the graphics slots. And only the first 3 are required by design to have at least one PCI Express 5.0 NVMe slot for a fast solid-state drive. Other than that, the differences between the AM5 chipsets are related to the number of additional PCI Express lanes and super speed 20GB and 10GB USB ports. Let's take them one by one and see exactly what they offer. The X670E is AMD's most powerful AM5 chipset for Ryzen 7000 series CPUs. Under the hood, it's a chipset made of not one, but 2 smaller chips that communicate between themselves via 4 PCI Express 4.0 lanes. By design, the X670E chipset supports 24 direct processor PCI Express 5.0 lanes. 16 lanes go to the graphics slots. You can use one graphics card in X16 mode or 2 in X8 mode. 4 lanes are used for a fast NVMe SSD. 4 lanes are general purpose lanes, GPPs, meaning they are free and they can be used independently as the motherboard manufacturer sees fit. Besides the direct processor PCI Express 5.0 lanes, the X670E also offers 12 PCI Express 4.0 lanes and 8 PCI Express 3.0 lanes. Manufacturers can use the PCI Express 4.0 lanes to implement other fast components on their motherboards like Ethernet, Wi-Fi or additional NVMe SSD slots. PCI Express 3.0 ports can be used for lower speed components such as SATA ports, namely for hard disk drives. Another key aspect of the X670E chipset is that it also supports a maximum of 2 super speed USB ports at 20GB and 12 super speed USB 10GB ports. So, X670E motherboards are the best choice for PC enthusiasts and users who require high performance, extended PCI Express 5.0 connectivity, and as many high-speed ports as they can get. These motherboards are made for gamers and professionals who want the best of the best, and they are an excellent pair for flagship CPUs such as the Ryzen 9 7950X or 7900X. Unfortunately, high-end hardware comes at a steep price, so the X670E motherboards will require quite a deep wallet. Get ready to pay anywhere between $330 and $1,300 for one. I love the Asus Prime X670E Pro Wi-Fi that I tested recently, and I warmly recommend it to anyone who wants a well-balanced motherboard. And its price is about $350. Or maybe you'd like to splurge a bit more on a superior model like the ROG Crosshair X670E Hero, which also has Wi-Fi 6E, which sells around $700. But hey, the sky is the limit when it comes to high-end devices, so if money doesn't matter, you could even spend $1,300 for an MSI MEG X670E godlike gaming motherboard. Moving on, the X670 high-end chipset is, more or less, the same as the E variant. It's also dual chiplet, meaning that this one too has 2 smaller chips inside it, connected via 4 PCI Express 4.0 lanes. However, on the X670 there are only 8 usable direct processor PCI Express 5.0 lanes available. 4 of them go to the NVMe slot and 4 general purpose lanes can be used by motherboard manufacturers as they see fit. AMD artificially downgraded the X670 chipset by limiting the speed of the graphics slot to PCI Express 4.0. That means that any graphics card you mount on an X670 motherboard will work on PCI Express 4.0 Max, even if it's a PCI Express 5.0 GPU. While that's not an issue right now, as no graphics card can truly benefit from the huge bandwidth offered by PCI Express 5.0, it is worth keeping this in mind for the future if you intend to keep the AM5 motherboard for the many years to come. The other specs of the X670 are the same as the ones of the chipset. 12 PCI Express 4.0 lanes, free to use by the motherboard's manufacturers for things like Ethernet, Wi-Fi or NVMe. 8 PCI Express 3.0 lanes, up to 2 20GB and 12 10GB USB ports, and up to 8 SATA ports. X670 based motherboards are for those who want to get their hands on most of the features of the X670E chipset, including PCI Express 5.0 support for the NVMe SSD slot, but are okay with running their graphics card on PCI Express 4.0. This will give you the option to build a computer with some of the best hardware available today. For the CPU, I'd say a Ryzen 9 7900X or Ryzen 7 7700X would be the right choice, while still keeping the costs a bit lower than going with an X670E motherboard. Get ready to spend somewhere around $280 for a motherboard like the MSI Pro X670P. Moving on now to the even cheaper options, the B650E is the mid-range chipset for Zen 4 CPUs. Unlike the other two, the B650E and B650 don't have a dual chiplet design. There's only one chip inside the chipset, and while we'll still get the same features as on the high-end chipsets, the total number of PCI Express lanes and ports is lower. On the bright side, just like the X670E flagship, the B650E offers 16 PCI Express 5.0 lanes for the graphics slots, 1 graphics card in X16 mode or 2 in X8 mode, 4 PCI Express 5.0 lanes go to a fast NVMe SSD, 4 PCI Express 5.0 GPPs can be used independently according to the motherboard's manufacturer's choice. However, besides the 24 direct processor PCI Express 5.0 lanes, the chipset only has 12 additional PCI Express 4.0 and 3.0 lanes. Depending on the motherboard manufacturer, this can be used for connecting other components or as NVMe ports, for instance. Last but not least, the B650E also supports a combination of either one SuperSpeed USB 20GB port and 2 10GB USB ports, or 4 SuperSpeed USB 10GB ports. If you're a gamer, the B650E chipset is the one you should look for. Motherboards based on it offer the same performance as the ones using the X chipsets and also come with extended PCI Express 5.0 support for the graphics card included. If you can live with a lower number of ports and you're also careful with your budget, the B650E motherboard is the best choice. As far as I've seen on Amazon, prices range somewhere between $270 for an ASRock B650E PG Riptide, for example, and $350 for a Gigabyte B650E Aorus Master. A good pair for such a motherboard would be a Ryzen 7 7700X or a Ryzen 5 7600X. Similar to how the X670 is a cut-down version of the X670, the B650 is a shrunk version of its E chipset. Well, moving on. In most respects, like the number of PCI Express lanes or SuperSpeed USB ports available, the B650 is identical to the E version. However, there's one essential difference. The B650 chipset is designed for PCI Express 4.0 connectivity only. By default, it doesn't offer PCI Express 5.0 for the graphics slot or other components. Still, AMD left an open loophole in this chipset. If a motherboard manufacturer wants, it can add an NVMe slot that supports PCI Express 5.0 in X4 mode. A B650 motherboard is what you should buy if your budget is somewhat constrained. It's a clear choice for anyone looking to build a budget-friendly yet still powerful desktop computer. If you don't need PCI Express 5.0 or a lot of high-speed ports, but you want to switch to a new Ryzen 7000 processor, B650 offers everything you could ask for. Moreover, the performance you'll get from the CPU is the same as with any of the higher-end chipsets. To keep the costs in check, I'd pair a B650 motherboard with a Ryzen 5 7600X CPU. The price for a B650 motherboard starts from somewhere around $200. For instance, a Gigabyte B650M Aorus Elite is sold for exactly $200, while an Asus TUF Gaming B650 Plus, that also includes an M2 PCI Express 5.0 slot, will cost you around $240. Hopefully, now you know more about the differences between the AM5 chipsets. You've seen how the motherboards compare, and I hope we shed some light about what these chipsets offer. What would you go for? Will you choose a flagship motherboard based on an X670E chipset? Will you show moderation with an X670 or B650E? Or will you stick to your budget and choose a B650 motherboard? Let us know in the comment section below. That was it for today. I truly hope it was helpful, and if you found it as such or even interesting, please subscribe to our teeny tiny channel. Good luck and thanks for watching.